Hello, konnichiwa, dozo yoroshiku. In Japanese poetry, we know the haiku best, and we know the poet Basho best. My favorite of his is Kiyotaki ya, nami ni chirikomu aomatsuba. Kiyotaki is a place near Kyoto, but it means clear waterfall. So the poem says, clear waterfall, into the waves fall blue pine needles. You can think about it that way, or focus on the place's name and read it as Kiyotaki, into the waves fall blue pine needles. For me, it's meaningful because I've hiked around the Kiyotaki River. Near one of the bridges, a boulder has this poem carved into it. One interesting thing about the line blue pine needles is that it calls attention to the fact that historically, Japanese didn't always think of blue and green as different colors. Ao is blue, and now the word for green is midori. In the West, we might get a sense that the pine needles are bluish, like spruce needles, but they're probably just green. Still, he says aomatsuba, green pine needles, instead of just saying pine needles and expecting readers to understand that these are pine needles and have us think of them as green and a few inches long and pointed and a little scratchy. Reading pine needles, we're likely just to accept that a pine needle is a pine needle. He emphasizes the image. The line gives us more to imagine. We're more likely to picture the scene than just to think the words pine needles and move on. When you read a haiku, try to imagine the experience. More importantly, this poem is Basho's last, one of two poems considered his death poems, along with Falling Ill on a Journey, A Dream Over a Withered Moor Runs About. But he had written Kiyotaki earlier and revised it on his deathbed. Basho's most famous haiku is The Old Pond. Old pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of the water. You can see here that the rule for a haiku of 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables doesn't necessarily translate well. The journey poem is closer to the most common category of poetry here in the West, the lyric poem. Poems are often classified as lyric, expressing the reader's emotion, narrative, telling a story, or dramatic, representing a scene like a little play. I'd say haiku is in more an observational or descriptive category. Kiyotaki and The Old Pond don't express much of the speaker-observer's emotions. While the journey has the emotionally loaded dream over the withered moor, the observer is a point of view on that event. Most haiku can create an emotional response of some kind, and any description is subjective for the writer's point of view. But William Wordsworth's definition of poetry, especially lyric poetry, as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, it takes its origin from emotion, recollected in tranquility, is more direct about the emotion and involves the writer feeling and recollecting it more. Haiku do evoke emotions, but sometimes they're also little narratives like drinking morning tea, it's quiet, chrysanthemum flowers. Or on this road no one travels, an autumn evening. They don't have a lot of story to tell to qualify as full narrative or dramatic poetry, although they're not directly lyrical poems expressing the reader's emotions about the events and scenes. They do imply a feeling, and a reader can respond with a feeling. Don't try too hard to read them as symbols or metaphors. Certain images have symbolic value. The cuckoo, for instance, represents summer and has other associations in Japanese culture. Even in Kyoto, I have happy memories of Kyoto, a cuckoo bird. But these associations are part of the context of the poem and its image, adding to the image as the focus, rather than image being there to make the reader think about the symbolic meaning. If anyone asks you, the simplest answer is that haiku are lyric poems. But really, they're not only primarily observational, but they're also not originally a form of writing on their own account. The reason for a haiku was to start a longer, linked verse poem called a renga. Haiku that aren't part of a renga were really just practice starting poems. Of course, that's how haiku started. And of course, Basho and other poets like Buson and Issa wrote haiku for their own sake. So haiku did become a popular genre of their own. Kiyotaki and the old poem were poems complete in themselves. Now, about Basho. Matsuo Basho was from a samurai family. They weren't the sword fighting kind of samurai. For a lot of Japan's history, samurai were the social class who ran the government. They were bureaucrats. They were public officials. They were scholars. In Basho's time, the late 1600s, Japan was in the Edo period, the time after the bad civil wars, when the country was unified and peaceful. He worked for the local lord for a while in his small castle town of Iga Ueno, and then he went off to study literature and Buddhism. He published and wrote and began to take on poetry students. He lived in the capital, Edo, now called Tokyo. He lived for a while in Kyoto, the old capital. I've been there, Rakushisha, the house of the fallen persimmons. He traveled around Japan. While at Rakushisha and while hiking around the country, he wrote travel journals, haibun, which are prose narratives of the trip with some haiku about impressive moments. The famous haibun is The Narrow Road to the Deep North. The haibun about his time here at Rakushisha is The Saga Diary. I love Rakushisha. Here's one of the haiku from Saga Diary. May rain. The poem cards peeled off, marks on the wall. Now these are my favorites, for my own reasons. They probably won't mean as much to you. You can read more haiku and some renga and haibun and pick your own favorites. But to end this video, here are several haiku to think about and imagine. They aren't great translations. They're my literal dictionary translations. You can find better collections, more poetic, but here they are. Clear waterfall, into the waves fall blue pine needles. Old pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of the water. Even in Kyoto, I have happy memories of Kyoto, a cuckoo bird. As it's setting, the sun also in the hot, hazy air lingering. In spring, great spring, and so on. Plums, young greens, the Mariko Inn's yam soup. So there you go. Thank you. Goodbye.